Welcome, everyone. Dr. Thor Templar here, and an interesting aspect has come up here recently, which I think a lot of people have a question on, is do spirits speak to you in your own language? Meaning, if a spirit from ancient times is Greek, would they speak to you in English, and would you know? Well, this is an interesting question, and to a certain amount it defies rational logic, but not when you're talking about there is no time and space. You're communicating with someone's essence, which is then being transferred to you and also translated to you. What value would anything have if spirits don't understand what you're saying? Because how would you even get a response if you're an English speaker and they don't understand English, and vice versa? How would you know if messages came through? This is a very interesting and something to ponder, but in the general picture and through the lots of research, and there's been a huge amount of research done in the spiritualism community when it was very large in the end of the 1800s into the 1900s, and even continues today, is that spirits, no matter where they are, communicate with you in a language that you understand. And generally they're not popping up in front of you like a Hollywood movie and speaking to you. So it's going to the actual person, and they're getting the information. Now, for that to work, particularly with the very diverse languages on this planet, I mean, it's amazing that people who even live within 100 miles of each other speak completely different languages. We see this particularly throughout all of Europe, but this was also true in the American Indian tribes who had different languages. So all of this, and there are then dialects, so things keep getting bastardized away from the original language. As everybody has dialects, they use different words and express themselves in different manners, even if they're using the same language. I mean, a lot of people have said this about the British. Of course, they speak a certain type of English, which they do. And they have all sorts of slangs and different meanings, and they use even different words. While we would say a napkin is something you clean your mouth with, a napkin to the Brits is a diaper. And we go on and on, loo for toilet, and all other things. So, I mean, there are completely different words, and of course, the really only superior language is American English, which has really taken all this and defined it a lot better, while British English tends to be confusing and filled with so much slang, even in common times, and words that are totally and completely foreign to other English speakers, that if you learn British English, you're going to be lost in many areas. So the hybrid, or the evolution of English, which has been taken over by the Americans, is a far superior language than whatever we call this. The British speak it, have a different accent, not in regions. Every street in England virtually has, or the UK has, a different accent almost. So we need to understand that. But when it comes to actual spirit communications, the fact is that a universal language, meaning your language, is the way they come through. So they're communicating to you, and this seems to be how the spirit world worked. If it didn't, then everybody would have to learn that language. So if you're speaking to spirits, a lot of ancient spells will be in the original language, and they claim to use this. There certainly is a sense to that a spirit would understand this better, but people who are not native speakers of African or other languages generally are able to evoke and invoke spirits, and there is not a problem. Now, speaking the actual language, I'm not sure if there's ever been enough research there, but when it comes to spiritualism, this doesn't seem to be the case. Now, this was one of the problems, or one of the concerns brought up by that little scumbucket Houdini when he got a reading from Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's, the famous author of Sherlock Holmes, and his wife was a spiritualist, and he was very interested in these areas. And Houdini criticized the fact that his mother, who he was trying to contact, didn't speak any word of English, so how would they possibly be able to communicate? But we've already found out that spiritualism has been proven 100% in research that spirits of the dead that are gone can be contacted. There seems to be a problem with them actually assisting, but this has been proven time and time again by multiple researchers for over 100 years. As of recent, a research company out of Arizona, headed by some very qualified scientists, have confirmed the fact that yes, you can talk to people who've passed over, which is opening up such a can of worms that isn't even funny, but it's nothing unusual. I'm not sure we should overthink this. What we need to do is figure out what are their practical uses. So information will come that way. Now, with Houdini, of course, the spiritualist channel wrote down things that came through from his mother. She did not come. Apparently, she was Hungarian, I believe, a Hungarian Jewish. His father was a rabbi, and he was a Mason. Just for those little tidbits, where a guy didn't believe in anything. Well, you can't believe in nothing and be a Mason, and he came from a line of spiritual people, which is interesting. But Houdini was quite a little bugger, and a liar, deceitful, cheater, everything else has been proven by his statements, because he was protecting his magic business, which was actually under great threat by the spiritualist community. People were going to seances. They weren't going to magic shows. Did anybody understand that? He wasn't doing anything seeking truth. He was protecting his own wallet. So the whole idea is that in this actual reading that he got, it all came through in English, and he so this woman could write it down and understand it. This is one thing that he criticized, and she also put a cross at the top of the page, which is very typical of spiritualists, since they tend to be Christian-based, and this was a way of sanctifying or causing a sacred space of her actual. And he criticized the fact that his mother was Jewish. She would never use a cross. Well, it didn't come from her. The spiritualist did. Secondly, Houdini refused to communicate with the channel or with Sir Arthur Conan Doyle to ask any specific questions. He didn't ask anything to identify the spirit. So what was brought through is what's brought through in a lot of these situations, and seems to be the case with spirits that have passed. They're not too interested in politics. They're not too interested in what's happening in the world. They give you very family-based information, saying, well, things are good here, blah, 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 and so forth. So there isn't detailed, practical information. While these things have been noted many times where certain relatives have come through to save somebody or give them information, this seems to be pretty rare. They talk about things that really have absolutely little to no value. Now, he had a chance there to ask specific questions to identify it. The reason he didn't do that, well, why wouldn't you do that sitting in there? Do you go to a psychic and sit there and they just tell you everything and you don't ask questions? Well, that's nonsense, because you're asking for specific things. And now, Houdini, who claimed to be so smart and know what's going on, should have been able to ask very poignant, pointed questions to identify if he could get this exact information. Why didn't he do it? Because he knew that spiritualism was real. And if these were confirmed, that he would ask, what happened on a date? What is this exact information that he could verify, because he knew it and probably nobody else would know that information. Certainly not some random spiritualist or Sir Arthur Conan Doyle who never knew his mother. Certainly would not have the information about her of something intimate or unusual. Yet he did none of that because he didn't want the hardcore proof. Now, the fact that Doyle and his wife didn't push this issue and say, why don't you ask something specific, is a problem in itself as well. But Sir Arthur Conan Doyle foolishly thought that Houdini was a friend of his. Yet everything that he ever told Houdini, he ran right out to the newspapers and told them without, no matter how personal it was. That's the kind of scumbucket little Houdini was. And was a pretty poor magician in general, and he basically was an escape artist. And you can give that whatever you want. Certainly it's a talent of what useful capacity, I have no idea, other than making money off of suckers that go to these shows and like to be tricked. Like people go to magicians of today and they laugh at you while they do all sorts of jokes to trick your eyes and so forth and put you in a certain position so you can't see everything, and then make you look like a fool to believe in things that don't really happen. So, we all need to fully understand that. But in general, when you get information from any non-physical source, it's going to come to you in a fashion that you can understand it. So this again may seem illogical, but we're talking about things that are not based in our very straightforward, straight line attitude. Well, it has to come this, the person. Well, it's not the way it works. Based in quantum physics and quantum entanglement, everything is combined together, and you really wouldn't think that information that was given to you from the non-physical realms, meaning not in a written book, would come to you in a manner that you could understand. Just as simple as that. Until next time.